Chapter 4 starts a few hours after the battle with Del Lago. Leon lost consciousness for the second time today, and now night has fallen. This brings about some consequences that will be made apparent shortly. Not much to say about this opening area though. There's just a bit of loot to grab before heading out. This is one of the Plaga mutations. These bladed ones are the Guadagna variant. I run past it as well as the next enemy and get up the stairs. Once there, I set up an execution on the regular Ganado. This enemy will also mutate if he is killed without using a knife prompt. For the Plaga, I use this little exploit that I discovered. The Plaga gets stuck in this spot and doesn't even try to attack, which lets me safely stab it until it dies. There's no real reason to bother with any of this though. As is usually the case, you can easily run past these enemies and move on without incident.
What is this place? Some kind of shrine.
The main objective of this chapter is to find 2 key items that will allow me to get the key for the church. This brings me back to the boat and the main gimmick of Chapter 4. I'll be using it to travel to various areas on the map. My first order of business will be obtaining the first key item, which is nearby. Getting a frontal stealth kill on this guy is easy and consistent. There are a lot of enemies in this cave and they all have a high likelihood of undergoing Plaga mutations. As such, I want to use knife executions to bypass as much of that as possible. However, my knife's durability will quickly run out if I try to force that on every enemy. Technically, I could keep running back to the merchant for repairs, but I didn't want to be that much of a whim. That dynamite enemy can be a nuisance, but thankfully he blew himself up. I haven't found a way to effectively use him to kill other enemies, so this is the best case scenario. I make sure to unlock this door to secure my escape route. Once I travel far enough into the cave, another small wave of enemies will spawn. One of them has a Molotov, which I try to use against them. The door I unlocked also provides a nice way of slowing down and funneling the enemies to make them easier to pick off. If I wanted to, I could try leading the enemies close to the boat. Then I could get back onto the boat and throw harpoons at them. It's an efficient way of dispatching them, but it can be annoying to pull off since they will all try to run away once you return to the boat. I come over here so I can lure a few more enemies to where I am. I want to deal with them now so I won't run into them later. There's another Molotov guy too, so I'm hoping he takes himself out as well. This enemy is an unusual case. He never moves from his spot and he always seems to throw hatchets even if you're very close to him. Getting behind him also provides a free knife prompt. It's strange, but at least he's easy to get rid of.
Ahí va eso.
This dynamite guy managed to avoid blowing himself up, but I was still able to take him out with another free knife prompt from behind. With him out of the way, I can safely pick up the first key item, the apostate's head. With that, I'm just going to make a run back towards the boat. This is easily done since I took out most of the enemies and the new ones that have spawned in will be too slow to offer any opposition.
Detrás de ti, Betty. Ahí va eso.
Not too difficult of a section. It can be made easier and faster by, once again, just running past everything. It's also the only potentially threatening area you will have to deal with. The remaining key item is in a completely safe location. I could go for it now, but I'm opting to go around and visit all of the optional areas. There is a lot of treasure to collect and another set of enemies to take on. You might be wondering why I'm bothering with any of this since my knife is already fully upgraded. There's nothing else to spend my money on outside of repairs which are inexpensive. Well, I just want to show off as much of the game as possible while under these restrictions, even if it makes my job harder. There are some interesting scenarios that can crop up when you try to approach them through the lens of knife only, though I will admit that there are still some things that I could have done in later parts of the game that I didn't end up doing. They just demand way more than they're worth. But I do have separate videos covering those things, so I will point those out when they become relevant. I've come back to this area to visit the merchant and put in a save. But before doing any of that, there is another treasure I can pick up. Earlier in this chapter I picked up an item called the Old Way Shrine Key. There are a handful of way shrines around the village that I'm now able to open up with that key.
Got some new milk.
Most business I have with the merchant will be much simpler from now on since my knife is maxed out. This time I just repair it before saving at the typewriter. At this point, I'm going to start saving up the handgun ammo I find rather than selling it. I'll need a lot of it in Chapter 7. There's a big sequence there that is impossible to do with only the knife. Most of you probably know what I'm referring to, but we'll cross that bridge when we get there. My next destination is the Lakeside Settlement. I was last there all the way back in Chapter 1. I wasn't able to get all the loot there back then, so I'll be able to rectify that on this trip. It's also where the last set of enemies before the boss fight can be found. The reason I saved beforehand is that I'll have to deal with some dogs among those enemies. I don't have to worry about them yet though. At the start, there are only 2 enemies to contend with, and they can be taken out with stealth. I wait at the bottom of this ladder until the enemy above walks past it. Then, I can climb up and get an easy stealth kill on him. The insignia key I got in Chapter 2 lets me access this cave. There isn't that much to find here though. It's mostly standard loot, but there is a small key to find. Climbing the ladder and entering this area is what causes the next wave of enemies to spawn. This is where the small key is, so you would have to deal with those enemies if you want the key. I'd recommend looting everywhere else on the lakeside settlement before that, but for my purposes, it made more sense to get the key first. Upon exiting the door, the dogs will appear. I make sure to skip the cutscene and immediately start stabbing the first one. This dog undergoes a mutation which makes it much tankier. This forces me to engage with it longer than I would have liked, but it eventually goes down. For the rest of the dogs, I try to utilize the knockdown strategy and hope for the best. There is a bear trap that helps slow one of the dogs down, which gives me the space to deal with the rest. I got quite lucky with how things turned out. I haven't been able to find a good strategy for taking on the dogs here with the knife. It took me many attempts to get through them without taking damage. I wasn't able to find a way to consistently run past them without getting hit either. The small key honestly isn't worth the hassle, so I think it would be best to just forget about it. Still, I wanted to show off how it could be done. The dogs are the only issue here. The ganado are easily taken out either with stealth or executions. They'll likely mutate if they are killed any other way, unless you get them with any of the traps. Having some traps left over from Chapter 1 will make things much easier. If I didn't have that one bear trap that the dog ran into still active, I don't know what I would have done. The encounter would probably still be doable, but much less forgiving. With all of that out of the way though, all I'm left to do is pick up all of the remaining loot. There is nothing in this part of the map that is mandatory. Coming back here is optional. There is a lot of treasure to grab if you need more money, so it might be worth coming here if that is the case. Make sure not to forget the rhinoceros beetle since that's an easy 10k right there. There's also a treasure to find back where Luis was in Chapter 1. Chapter 4 as a whole provides a lot of money, certainly enough to get the knife maxed out if you haven't already. One of the small keys can be used here. There's another locked drawer close to where the merchant is. That's where I'll use the remaining key I have. You get exactly enough small keys for every locked drawer in the game, but they aren't all conveniently placed. This is more of an issue in the castle section since it requires quite a bit of backtracking to get everything. You can alleviate this by skipping one treasure and saving a small key from the village. The one I'd recommend skipping is the locked drawer in the church. I won't be doing that though. I just wanted to be thorough with treasure collecting for this run. Getting back onto the boat, the next thing on the agenda is to pick up the last key item I need, which is the Blasphemer's Head. There won't be any more enemies to deal with from this point onward until I reach the boss fight. There are still a handful of other locations to visit after getting that item. I'll be going through all of them. It's just that there isn't going to be much to talk about. Chapter 4, as I see it, is an homage to Chapter 3-1 from Resident Evil 5. In that game, you were also going around in a boat to various parts of the map to find several key items. In both games, there is a lot of treasure to find. There's a shipwreck with a weapon on it, and there's an island with many chickens on it for some reason. But there's a lot more going on in Resident Evil 5's take on this concept. There are more dynamic enemy encounters. You had some of them trying to attack you while you were controlling the boat, and you'd have Sheva snipe them. You had a memorable sequence where you have to trudge through waist-high water and avoid crocodiles. There was a consistent level of intensity throughout each sequence, and it all built up to the big fight in the village with the two giant Magini. In contrast, there's a whole lot of nothing going on in Chapter 4. Even the boss fight at the end doesn't really add much. I'm not saying that it's a bad chapter, it just sticks out to me when compared to the rest of the game. Chapter 9 does have a similar non-linear item collecting concept, but it comes with more interesting challenges and less downtime. The game as a whole typically has a lot more going on as you move from sequence to sequence, so Chapter 4 might be the only point in these videos where I'm struggling to find things to talk about. Here's the Red 9, which is the favorite handgun for many players of the original Resident Evil 4. Placing it in the overworld is a pretty welcome addition in my opinion. Obviously it's useless to me since this is a knife-only run, but it can be helpful in casual playthroughs. Although, my preferred handgun is the one Leon starts the game with. The Red 9 is more vital if you're doing the No Merchant challenge. The boost in firepower it provides is important, even though every other base stat it has is abysmal. This is where I was near the beginning of the chapter. I've come back to put the apostate and blasphemer heads in their places so I can obtain the church insignia. I sometimes forget that you have to come back here. It's a little inconvenient. With that done, I can finally head towards the boss fight. But before that, there are still a few more treasures I want to pick up. I also haven't yet mentioned the 2 merchant request items that I've acquired while going around the map, those being the gold chicken egg and the lunker bass. They can be sold to the merchant to fulfill each request and they give you a good chunk of money. Neither are particularly difficult to find. Here's one of the locked drawers I mentioned. After this one, there's only one more left to find in the village, that being the one in the church. I'm almost done with the treasure collecting in this segment too. There's just one more I want to grab before proceeding to the boss. This is the puzzle I started in the previous chapter. The last piece I needed was back in the cave where the blasphemer's head was found. The puzzle solution is quick and simple as long as you follow the correct steps. It doesn't matter what order you put the pieces in either, though the solution is different if you're playing on assisted or standard difficulty. For hardcore and professional, all you do is rotate the bottom right piece twice, then the bottom left piece twice, and finally the top piece once. The pieces can be rotated in only one direction, so that's not something you have to worry about. Not much to do here at the merchant but sell most of my stuff. You'll see that I get quite a lot of money out of it. It pays off to explore as much as you can in this chapter. There's no doubt that you'll have enough to fully upgrade the knife at this point, just in time for the boss too. It's nothing to be intimidated about though. It's actually quite an easy fight. Still, I'm going to put down a save beforehand. It's been a while since the last one, and I want to lock in all of the progress I've made. Wouldn't want to slip up and get sent all the way back to the dogs. Here we have the boss of Chapter 4, El Gigante. The game plan is simple. I'm going to stay behind his legs and keep stabbing away at them. This position will force him to do the stomp attack most of the time. All I have to do is reposition when he does that and repeat the process. When enough damage is dealt, the giant's back parasite will expose itself and that makes him behave more aggressively. The process remains the same though. While in this state, he is more likely to do a side swipe with his arm rather than the stomp. Dodging it isn't too hard, but the end lag of that attack is far shorter than the stomp, so he can initiate another attack almost right away. I just have to react to it all accordingly and not get too greedy with stabs. For the most part, the boss has no real chance of damaging me as long as I don't mess up my movement. After either taking a certain amount of damage or enough time has passed with the parasite exposed, the giant will fall to his knees. When that happens, a knife prompt will appear which allows me to attack his parasite directly. This consumes a bit of durability, but spending it this way is both more efficient and finishes the fight faster than sticking with only manual stabs. The parasite will retract afterwards and I can regain my position behind the boss to start the loop all over again. That's really all there is to it. Sometimes he can decide to walk over to the sheds in the arena so he can throw them at you, but they're very easy to dodge. It's quite a forgiving boss fight when it comes to knife only. There were points where I had less than ideal movement, and even then I still avoided taking damage. All this boils down to is getting comfortable with looping the stomp attack. I had to learn that back when I did the No Merchant challenge. This fight is agonizing on that challenge, but that's neither here nor there. The other thing I need to address is the dog, which I sort of half rescued in Chapter 3. If I freed it the normal way, it would come to quote-unquote assist me in this battle. This causes a few problems. The main one is that the dog distracts El Gigante. This makes manipulating his attack patterns far more unreliable, which in turn slows down the process of dealing damage while also making things more unsafe. The next issue is that at a certain point, the dog will initiate a cutscene which causes the boss to get stunned and permanently exposes his parasite. That might sound very helpful, but it actually causes the boss to regain health to a specific value. Now, it may not actually be that much of a gain, since I'm not exactly dealing a ton of damage with the knife, but I have just barely enough durability to make the knife last without the dog's interference, so it's not a risk worth taking. Lastly, the dog itself is something you can physically interact with, meaning you can run into it, or it can run into you and screw up your movement. There are too many things going against rescuing the poor thing, so it's best just to let it sit this one out. I realize that the fight has long since ended during all of my rambling, but there wasn't much else to say to begin with. El Gigante is easy to take down with a knife. There's a little risk involved. After the fight, I head back to repair my knife since I'm going to need it back to max to deal with the start of the next chapter. Though there is also one last enemy to deal with before chapter 4 ends. I picked it up already, but there is a velvet blue behind the door that the boss broke out of at the start of the fight. It's an easy treasure to forget. You'll want to make sure to loot the sheds as well since they have a lot of supplies, the most important of which being another kitchen knife. Once all of that is done, I can make my way back to the church. If you haven't fully looted the bridge area from chapter 3, now is the time to do so since there aren't any enemies to deal with. I've already gotten everything, so I'm just going to keep moving. And here's the last enemy of chapter 4. Just another dog. It doesn't pose much of a threat on its own. I take it out with stabs before it even gets the chance to do anything. You don't have to bother fighting it though. It's safe enough just to run past it and straight into the church. It takes a little time for the door to open when you insert the church insignia, but even then, it's unlikely that the dog will actually hit you.
Ashley Graham! I'm here to help.
This blue dial is needed for a short puzzle that has to be solved before I can get to Ashley. For this puzzle, all you have to do is align the 3 colors with the emblem in the middle. It doesn't have to be exact, so it's nothing too hard. There's the final small key of the village. I'll be using it in the next chapter. With that, I can now make my way towards Ashley, who is being held captive on the 2nd floor. We aren't going to see gameplay with her in this chapter though.
Ashley, you in there?
That will bring us to the end of chapter 4. Overall, there just wasn't that much going on here. While I don't think it's as easy as chapter 3, It is easier than chapters 1 and 2. It can be made even easier by avoiding all of the possible combat encounters. El Gigante himself isn't much of an obstacle either. What's left of chapter 4 amounts to little more than travel time with nothing happening. This is a breather chapter if anything. It may not have been the most enthralling thing to watch, but I can promise you that is going to change in the next chapter. Chapter 5 introduces Ashley, who's going to complicate things for me, to put it mildly. The main attraction, though, is the dreaded cabin fight. The difficulty spike from that encounter is extreme, so look forward to that one. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video for Chapter 5. Take care.